Next, let's talk about covenants. The covenants of a loan are the agreements between the borrower and its lenders that the borrower will operate within certain rules set by the lenders. Covenants are typically put in place to help surface critical information about a company and to act as guardrails to help prevent a company from going into default. There are three types of covenants that we come across when structuring a loan. The first is the financial covenants, the second, portfolio covenants, and the third, information covenants. Let's start with financial covenants. As the name implies, financial covenants are the covenants that are financial in nature. They are typically made up of the following types of requirements. The first being the loan to value, or LTV. Now, the LTV represents the value of a loan compared to the size of the collateral pledged as security for the loan. In simple terms, the amount of money that a borrower is able to borrow is the LTV times the collateral value. LTV is represented in percentages and is almost always less than 100%. This is put in place by lenders to make sure that the value of the pledged collateral always exceeds the value of the loan. Next, debt to equity. This represents the ratio of a company's debt to its equity. It is calculated by dividing the company's debt by its equity and is represented as a multiple. This covenant is put in place to keep a company's borrowing in check and to ensure that it does not take on more debt than it can sustain. And lastly, there's typically a minimum cash requirement. And as the name implies, this is a requirement that at all times a company has some predetermined minimum amount of cash on its books during the term of the loan. Next, let's talk about portfolio covenants. These are the covenants that apply to a borrower's portfolio quality and are put in place to ensure that the borrower's portfolio meets a predetermined level of quality. These typically take the form of one, days past due covenants, and the days past due covenants are the covenants that state that the proportion of a company's portfolio that is at least a certain number X of days past due should stay below a predetermined percentage threshold. Now, X is typically 30, 60, or 90 days. And also, another set of portfolio covenants are the loss rates. And these state that the proportion of the amount of money lent out that the company loses be below a certain threshold. For example, loss rates less than 6% suggest that the proportion of principal lent out by the company that the company ends up losing should stay below 6% of the portfolio. And lastly, information covenants. These represent the pre-agreed information rights that a lender has and that the borrower must abide by. These typically include, but are not limited to, company financials, portfolio reporting, or any other sort of reporting that a lender determines is important. Now, all of these covenants, the financial, the portfolio, and the information covenants, typically represent typical covenants in a transaction. They are tested at pre-agreed time intervals, and the borrower is determined to be in default if they are in breach of these covenants. Next, we will talk about how we go about documenting these terms and ensuring that they are enforceable legally. Thank you.